Do you dream of writing a novel? When you feel the urgency to write a novel, you aren't making it up. When that urgency won't let go, there's a reason. Turn your readers into raving fans. Reveal the power of your voice and your story. Writing is an act of courage, and you have what it takes. How to Write a Novel That Sells by Lana McAra will take you across the finish line. Visit howtowriteanovelthatsells.net and take that powerful next step now.
Welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana McAra, where you will discover tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Here you'll find new energy, new perspectives, new resources, and new ideas that will spark your creativity into a blaze of brilliance. It's easier than you think. Be sure you visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, get out your notebook, tune in, and let's get started.
So what is story conflict anyway? A lot of people think it's just having problems. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Lana McAra, and welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast, tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Today, I'm delighted to welcome to the broadcast Margie Zable Fisher. Before becoming a full-time writer and author after the age of 50, Margie owned a PR company for 20 years. Her articles have been published in the New York Times, AARP, Fortune, Next Avenue, and more. She is a wife and mother. She loves Cabernet and the pool, and she competed in her first triathlon after the age of 50. Margie, we're going to have to talk about that. She plays pickleball several times a week and considers it a good day if she achieves genius status playing the New York Times spelling bee. She and her family live in Florida. Welcome, Margie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I've played pickleball a few times, and it is fun, I have to say.
Good.
There's like 4 or 5 different pickleball groups right up here in the countryside of North Florida. I'm astounded at how many there are.
It's everywhere.
Yes, it is. So what got you started writing fiction?
Well, that's a great question, Lana, because I really didn't have any inkling that I was going to be writing fiction. And the only reason I actually decided to write fiction was because I made a deathbed promise to my mother.
Wow.
Yeah, if that sounds pretty dramatic, it is actually. So what happened was about 2 years ago, found out my mom was sadly dying from pancreatic cancer, came on really quickly. And at the time, she had been working on her first adult fiction novel. Now, prior to that, she had written all the way back in the 1980s and 1990s, young adult and middle grade fiction. And then she had been an editor of a senior citizen newspaper, and then she was retired. So for years, she had been working on this adult novel that she had brought to her writers' groups and talked to me about, and never really wanted to figure out how to get it published. But when she was literally on her deathbed, a few days before she passed away, I said, "Mom, I'm going to get your novel published because it would really be a gift to the world." And what I meant by that was the fact that it featured older characters. The main character is a new retiree. And it was really, really empowering for older people. And both Mom and I are over 50. And we both agreed that life began after 50. So we wanted to carry that message through. In the book, the novel does a great job of that. So I said, well, I'm going to figure out how to get it published. And she said, well, don't bother self-publishing it because that's not okay. You know, she had been published by major New York City publishers, even though that was 30 or 40 years ago and it was a different world. And I said, okay, I'll somehow figure this out for you. So after she passed away, I picked up the manuscript and I looked through it and I thought, something's not quite ready yet. I've read a million novels, right? I'm a big reader. It's not quite ready. I don't really know exactly why it isn't ready, but it isn't ready. So I started doing research and I said, you know what? I'm going to put aside some time and try and get this manuscript into better shape, especially since I had to find a real publisher. Okay. So I went through it and I started listening to podcasts and I started doing research online. And then finally, I didn't know exactly what I didn't know. So I hired a developmental editor. And she went through the chapters by chapter and the overall novel and let me know all the stuff that needed to be changed. And it was a lot. So 3 months later, I had added about 20,000 words, changed the whole central conflict, added characters, changed some of the plot, changed the opening. And at this point, I'd probably written about 40%. My mom had about 60%. And I started to shop it around. And a year later, I found a small publisher called Sibylline Press that only publishes books by women authors over 50. And the novel just came out last week, actually, on the novel came out on January 31st, 2025, and it's called The Cabernet Club. And we are co-authors, my mom and I.
What a beautiful story. Wow. And the book just came out. Well, by the time the podcast comes out, it's probably going to be around March.
Yeah.
But it's on Amazon, right? Give us a title.
Yep. It's The Cabernet Club. And the motto of the Cabernet Club is, why can't the rest of your life be the best of your life?
I love that. I love that because I had a life change too after 50, shortly after I turned 50. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. New career, new person. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's a lot changes after 50.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds to me like you continued to research fiction and learn fiction.
Yeah, I had to keep working on it. So what happened was, I finished it. And then through the year that I was trying to send it to publishers and agents, I was constantly working on it. And then, of course, once my publisher accepted it, the editor wanted changes and then I wanted changes. So, when I see this novel, I'm like, how many times have I gone through these 350 pages? A lot. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I totally understand.
You know you do.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. So what led you to, we're going to talk about conflict today. So
Yeah.
what is your learning or how did you get into, this topic of conflict?
Well, I have to tell you, that was the area that I struggled with the most in this book. And spoiler alert, I'm also plotting out the second and third book in the series. So, yeah, these are character-driven novels, right? Women's fiction, okay? And we can talk about this a little bit more later when we get into it, but certain types of novels are harder to identify conflict in, okay? So a thriller or a mystery, pretty clear that you can find pretty easy external conflict, like someone is trying to kill you or someone's trying to blow up, the president of the United States or things like that, right? Those are more obvious, but really conflict in other types of novels that are more character driven or can really be difficult. And I have some thoughts about conflict if you want me to talk about why we need them in novels and what they mean.
Sure. Let's start off by just talking about what is conflict.
Okay, so conflict can be a lot of things. And I think you and I were talking about this a bit, but it isn't necessarily people arguing with each other, although that can be a conflict, of course, right? So it could be something as simple as having a disagreement with yourself, like struggling to make a decision. That is something we might call internal conflict. That's pretty common with character-focused novels. Then external conflict, which most people really are familiar with, are things like a hero versus a villain, or man versus nature, like, trying to deal with a hurricane, okay? Or something about supernatural, trying to live through an alien invasion. Or even technology, like the Terminator. So there's all kinds of conflict. And then those are bigger conflicts. Sometimes there's tiny conflicts. And I learned that you have to have conflict all the time because, as Jerry Jenkins said, he is a prolific writer and also teaches a lot about it. Conflict is the driver, the engine of fiction. So you can't even have fiction without conflict. So even if it's just arguing with your friend about whether chocolate or vanilla ice cream is better, you have to have that. It's part of life, and it makes the ups more satisfying and it makes the downs more understandable.
Yes, and I find that giving the main character or characters some type of psychic wound, like this person is afraid of heights because they fell as a baby and they've got this psychic wound of falling. But in order to save the day, they have to climb over something that's really tall.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect example. I like psychic wound. In fact, I'm going to make a note to use that if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So giving the character these like little Easter eggs and then tweaking them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah. So I love the way that you put it as internal conflict and external conflict.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that. Let's talk first about what is external conflict and how does that pull the story forward?
So every novel has to have a central conflict. And by a central conflict, I mean a conflict that's strong enough that really takes you from the beginning to the end. And it has to be a big enough conflict that it's a real problem for the main character, okay? So there's really one type of internal conflict, and that's you versus yourself. So it's struggling with your own emotions, your own decisions, your own identity, your own feelings of worth, anything like that, okay? Again, those are really with a lot of character-driven novels. External conflict, there's quite a few of them. So one is you versus someone else. And again, that's usually a hero versus a villain, typical thriller, someone trying to save the world, or a detective trying to find out who committed a crime. Okay. Second example would be man versus society, which would be something like oppression or societal norms, such as lessons in chemistry, where the woman from I think it was in the 1950s, she was battling the whole culture that women weren't allowed to do things and weren't scientists. And that was a really big part of the novel. That happens a lot in historical fiction. Then we have man versus nature, which is quite common in movies, movies especially, in thrillers where you have a natural disaster or you have an animal or you're struggling for survival. That's basically you against the natural world. A fourth one would be supernatural, and that would be things like aliens or gods or fantasy, things where the main character's up against someone that is from another place, which brings a lot of unknowns to the situation. And then there's man versus technology, which is becoming, sadly, more prevalent, where we have conflicts involving machines or the dangers of technological advancement.
AI. I've seen movies about AI.
And you'll probably see more.
In Man versus Man, where it's hero villain, there is one little nuance of that, where the person you're fighting against isn't necessarily evil. They just have a different agenda and they don't want you to succeed. And so you're fighting against the big corporation who wants the property for this reason and you want it for this other reason. Who's going to win? Yeah.
You're absolutely right. In fact, that may be just as common, because you're right. It's basically the main character is facing opposition from another person or another thing. Yes.
Yes, whether it's actually evil or not, it doesn't matter.
It may not, but there's opposition enough to create a strong enough conflict that it really affects the character's existence.
Yes, I'm reading a book right now. I'm almost finished with it. And I don't often read, just pick up a book and read it. Usually I have a reason, because I'm an editor and all that. But this one goes through the guy's life all the way from like 16 up until 60 plus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a good time for us to have this conversation. He did this, and then he did that, and then he went here, and then he went there, and then he met these people, then he met those people, then he went to another place. I'm still waiting to find out, what is the central conflict? What is a central conflict? What is it?
Do you happen to want to share the name of the book?
No.
That's fine. I'm trying
the person.
to think what it is. No. I'm trying to think. I have to tell you, that's a big problem. And that's a problem with a lot of books. And I'm not sure how they're published, but I find that tricky. But I did pull up an example because I thought this would be kind of fun that you might be interested in. So I decided to think about, what would the Snow White fairy tale be like with conflict, the original story, and what would the story be without conflict? So do you want
beautiful.
You want to hear the summary? Okay. So in the original story, the quick summary is this. Snow White tells the tale of a princess who is hunted by her jealous stepmother. She finds refuge with 7 dwarfs until her true love's kiss breaks the queen's deadly curse. So just from this quick summary, we can pinpoint a bunch of conflict in there, right? So now, if we did this story without conflict, here's a summary that might work. Snow White lives peacefully in the castle with her kind stepmother, enjoys visiting the 7 dwarfs as friends, and eventually meets a prince with whom she happily starts a new life.
Yeah.
Right? We all love a happy ending. Don't get me wrong. I love a happy ending. But that is not life. And that is not enjoyable. How can we appreciate the ups without the downs? It's not a story.
Right. And in this book, and I'm not going to tell the person's name because I know him.
That's even more.
Yeah. And this is coming out way later, so this will, be different. Okay. But he has a situation where he goes home after he's been in the military, and he finds out he doesn't fit in anymore. And he's bored. He's really bored, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. And his sister's married. He doesn't really like her husband. They just don't seem to be on the same wavelength. And it feels a little bit like conflict. It feels a little bit like stress. But at the same time, there's no goal. There's no objective. There's no problem specifically to overcome. He's just wanting to leave, and so eventually he leaves. So Talk about that a little bit.
I hate to admit it, and my mom, please God, I hope she's not turning in her grave, but we had that problem in the novel. We needed a really strong central conflict, and it wasn't there initially. And I have to tell you, to wrangle that central conflict in a character-driven novel can be very difficult. So I really had to work on that. And that's something that I think a lot of writers need to work on. And if even someone says, I'm not sure, like you're saying, I'm not sure what the central conflict is, I'm not sure what the goal is, that's a red flag. Like it basically means stop everything. Don't be fiddling around trying to make the dialogue cute or whatever. Like, stop. You need to get the foundation fixed. And really, the central conflict is everything. It drives everything. It drives the dialogue. It drives the smaller conflicts. It drives the types of characters you have. So you really need to focus on really nailing down that central conflict.
So it's the gas in the engine that keeps it going. So do you mind sharing what you came up with as your central conflict?
I thought you might ask me that. Thank you. Okay, so my main character has internal, which is, internal conflict, and an external, which is societal conflict. Okay. So the central conflict is that unless the main character, Debbie, makes a life for herself in Florida in a 6-month period, she will have to move in with her daughter and family in Delaware, likely becoming their unpaid nanny. So I'm not going to explain how that all came about because that's part of the book. But I did a 6-month timeline to keep the tension high. But really, it's a couple things. It's internal because what you don't see here is Debbie has always been really giving and done everything for herself. So when she finally has the chance to do something, her daughter is imposing this 6-month timeline. So that's an internal thing, like about her self-worth. The societal part is the man versus me and what you were alluding to. It's not an evil person. It's she and her daughter. They don't agree on this issue, but because of Debbie's own internal insecurities or whatever, she agreed to this, even though it was her dream to really move there to Florida from New England and have a great life. So it's a combination of internal and external conflict.
Every book has to have both. Yes.
It really helps to. I mean, there's some, that are really hardcore internal, a lot of character driven, but I agree. I like both.
Yes. Sometimes if it's an action story, where they're in war or something, you don't know that much about the characters except for their friendship. When you have the close friendship between two guys and one gets hurt and the other has to save him, that's good. But you don't really know much about back home or how they grew up. There are some stories that you just don't know that much. But if you're having a literary novel, and especially women's fiction, you're going to know all that stuff.
Absolutely. But you make such a good point. Yesterday at pickleball, I was talking to someone. We had both watched a medical drama on TV that's out right now. And I won't tell you which one it is. I find it enjoyable, but she said there's no central conflict plot, even though she's not a writer. That's the words I would use. But it was basically, people would come in and they would have a trauma and they would be worked on, but you didn't know what the whole point was with the characters. And that's just what you were saying too. So sometimes the action, thriller, mysteries lean heavily on the external danger, but it's hard to feel a sense of completeness if you don't know a little bit about the characters too. So I think it is important, like you said, to have a balance between the internal and external conflict.
Yes, I know some mystery, like hard-boiled mystery detectives, they don't have a life. You don't know their family. You don't know anything about them. You just know that they're there to solve the mystery, like Columbo kind of a thing.
Exactly. And I agree. I'm a fan of not giving too much background in the beginning also of a novel, right? Because we We know that gets boring. But I think you need to seed that in. Once people are interested in your novel and your characters, then you can start explaining it. And that's all about timing. But yeah, I think without that, you really don't have a lot to really feel good about.
Right, because you want your ending to be like, yay, they did it. Yay for them.
You want to root for the main character. You want to, you want to be their fan.
Yeah, absolutely. So does every chapter have to have a conflict?
Heck yes. And let me tell you, that's another thing that was very, very tricky. So I literally went through my new chapters and my mom's chapters, and I looked to see if we had conflict, and also making sure that the end of the chapter either had conflict or forward momentum for the next chapter. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I have to tell you, these are things, it sounds like people spend so much time on, dialogue and writing the right word. But guess what? If you don't have conflict in every scene, you may not need that scene. Right? I mean, if it's not or if it's not making a big point, if there's no tension to see, well, let me turn the page and see what happens. What's the point? You really need conflict to move things along. So yeah, it really needs to be, I think, in every scene and every chapter.
Yes, absolutely. You need that forward momentum. I just love the way you put that. There has to be forward momentum at the end of every chapter, especially.
Yes. And that is hard because sometimes it seems like there's pretty logical stopping point. Guess what? Not good enough. Because how many times, and I'm sure this has happened to you, Lana, that you've read maybe half a book, maybe a few chapters in, and you stop at a chapter and there's no reason to keep going, right? And if there's no reason to keep going, what's the impetus for you continuing to read? You don't want the reader to ever say that. You want them to say, oh my God, I may have stopped at chapter 3 because it's 3 a.m. and I got to go to bed, but I really want to read the next chapter tomorrow because this ending is just, I got to find out what happens next, right?
Yeah, you take it along, read it on your lunch break.
That's right. And I do.
Yes, absolutely. So conflict really does add a lot of energy into the story, especially if it's a combination of the outside problem to solve and also the inside struggle of, I know I need to do this, but I feel unworthy, or I tried it last time and it failed, and all those. We have those internal struggles every single day.
We do. And it's fun to have internal common struggles. And it's also fun to throw in conflicts that are really unique and surprising. And I think a combination of those things, you can't get too crazy because then people start saying, really, is this really true? But the point of fiction is to be fiction. You don't want it to be exactly like real life because sometimes real life is a little bit boring. So you have to amp it up a little bit. So I think a combination of real life conflict to make it relatable and some surprising things to keep things juicy and forward moving are really important.
Right. And you can cherry pick other things, like the main conflict is, let's say, a man against society, a person against society. It's a young woman who wants to break the mold, and she's in 1970. But then you can throw in, just chunk in man against nature, and she gets caught in a snowstorm and she's stranded, and how's she going to get home?
100%. And guess what? You need to do that because everything can't be, the biggest thing ever, right? I mean, that's your storyline that's going through, obviously, but you got to just go through and think about what's realistically going to happen. And sometimes a snowstorm could happen or something like that. But yeah, you got to throw in a few things there.
Yeah, keep it interesting. Yeah,
keep it interesting.
Absolutely. So what's next for you? Your book just came out. What's next?
Well, right now I'm just excited that things have come out, and I have my book launch party coming out and a virtual launch party. So that's exciting. But what happened was I had thought this was going to be a one and done project, basically to fulfill my mom's promise and to honor her legacy. But I found that I really loved the characters. And my mom was a master at creating amazing characters. I love them, and there's a lot. I kept thinking, oh, I'd love to talk about this, and here's another direction they could go in. And I thought, this could be a series. So I started writing down my thoughts, and I have the basics of book 2 and book 3 plotted out. So once the marketing and promotion and talking about this book dies down a little bit, I'm really going to jump in and start working on that.
Beautiful, beautiful. I have characters I just cannot let go. I just can't. And one of my series, when I finished the series finally, I knew it was done. I grieved. I grieved over them for months. I love spending time with them and finding out what they were going to do next.
I understand. Yep.
Yeah, they get under your skin, don't they?
They do. They do.
Well, give us your website so everyone can find you. And by the way, all of Margie's information is going to be in the show notes. And by the way, again, subscribe wherever you happen to be, wherever you're listening from, subscribe. It really helps the channel. So Margie, give us your website.
Sure. It's margiezfisher.com, and I'll spell it. It's MARGIE, letter Z like zebra, Fisher, FISHER.com. And you can find out about the book and my blog posts and all kinds of other stuff there.
Awesome. Margie, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been great.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. See you next time. Bye now.
Thank you for tuning into the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana McAra, where we share tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Remember to visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Fiction Writers Podcast.